Uncovering the secrets of Viking burial rituals. Death is very significant in most cultures, and the Vikings were no exception. Death was a common occurrence due to their low life expectancy and constant battles. The Vikings believed in the Old Norse tales and several rituals that would help them cremate their dead respectfully and prevent them from returning to haunt the living. You're watching Historical Saga, your everyday dose of unknown facts and newly discovered secrets about history. Today we're going to explore some of the well-kept secrets of the Viking burial rituals. Plenty of movies and loads of TV shows based on the Vikings have given us the idea that all Viking rituals were all about burning ships. Today we are going to delve deeper into the Viking burial rituals. Some gruesome, some that seem to be too weird to be true, but each equally fascinating. Today we shall introduce you to the stories of drunken celebrations, stairways to heaven, human sacrifices, scandalous rituals, and battles to the end of the world. But before we proceed any further, subscribe to Historical Saga and click on the bell icon for regular updates. The long ship burial. First and foremost, the most important custom of the Vikings was the long ship burial. Additionally, it is also the one that got popularized by modern media, for it makes for quite the dramatic scenes. It was an ornate custom followed by the richer and the more powerful of the society. An elaborate ship was created, which was then filled to the brim with food, clothes, and the prized possessions of the dead. It was then buried in the earth or set to flame while being set afloat in the sea. At times, even animals and weapons which had been used in battle were stored in the longship. The flames that engulfed the ship were considered the perfect temperature when they were hot enough to burn through both flesh and bone. The thicker the smoke that rose from the fire, the better it was supposed to be. A thick smoke would form a plume to the skies, called the stairway to heaven, which the dead soul would use as a pathway to the other world. The most striking example of the custom is the Osberg longship, which was excavated in Norway in 1904. The ship had been buried in clay, which allowed it to be found in a well-preserved condition thousands of years later. When found by archaeologists, all the prized possessions had already been stolen by grave robbers, while the everyday items were found intact. Aboard the ship it had two women, aged 80 years old and 50 years old, cremated alongside fine clothes and jewelry. Some have speculated that it might have been the burial of the famous Queen Asha of the Vikings. The Sioundi Feast. Now that we have discussed the more famous custom, let's move on to the lesser-known ones. Starting with the secrets, let's look at the Sioundi Feast. Vikings believed in celebrating the life of the dead. Even though the person had gone long ago, his achievements and legacy remained. After a period of the mourning observed for 7 days, the friends and family gathered for a feast. It was called a feast, but the food was never the substance consumed. It was an indulgence of the famous Viking ale, drunk from the classic drinking horn. If you think that this was just drinking like in the modern sense and munching on snacks, you cannot be any further from the truth. There wasn't much, if any, food involved in the feast because there was no eating allowed in the ceremony. On the other hand, every drop of alcohol was to be consumed. Unlike everyday occurrences where an offering to the gods was mandatory, there was no such compulsion at the funeral. In fact, it was believed that no ale should be offered to the gods, and that is why every last drop should be drank in the celebration. Only after this feast had concluded, the rightful heirs could claim the inheritance. Some historical records of inheritance being passed down to daughters, wives, and women of the family show that the Vikings might have been a much more socially advanced culture than what was previously believed. They were quite ahead of their time in this regard. If this is some new information that you've gathered today, do not forget to like the video. If historical facts interest you, follow our channel Historical Saga for more such amazing content. Now that we had a popular ritual, a drunken fest, and a progressive inheritance law, let's delve deeper and find some darker secrets: human sacrifices. Next up, we have a completely gruesome ritual that will tarnish the image of the Viking society for many years to come: human sacrifices. The Viking society was divided according to class, with the rich and the powerful on one end, and the thralls or the enslaved people on the other. With the burial or the cremation of every important or royal member of the society, such as the chieftains, the kings, or the queens, a thrall or an enslaved person was buried along with them. The burial and the sacrifice seemed to be voluntary, mostly looking at historical accounts. Enslaved people were buried in unmarked graves besides the grandiose graves of their masters. This practice is much like the present times, where oftentimes the poor are buried in unmarked graves. The position was adjusted in such a way that they would not only protect and serve their masters in death, but also not come back to hunt the living. If this practice of burying enslaved people along with their masters was not gross enough, the thralls were actually alive during the whole process, very much so with active breathing and beating hearts. This cremation, which can essentially be termed as human sacrifice, makes us here at Historical Saga think that Vikings might have been more on the savage side after all. The Nagfa. The Vikings believed in Norse mythology and feared the Nagfa, which literally translates to nail ship. In Old Norse, it was supposed to be made out of fingernails and toenails of the dead. It was a ship that was predicted to hold a very large army and force the gods to battle the forces of evil until it led to complete destruction. It was a concept as old as time and just as fearful. For one, it was believed that when the Nagfa came, the stars would disappear, the mountains would fall, and the trees uproot with branches snapping. The Viking society gave rise to another custom of dread of impending doom. The Draugar. Another creature of the dead that the Vikings believed in was the Draugar, something that is comparable to the modern-day zombies. An improper burial would lead to the rise of the Draugar, who would guard his treasures and punish those who had wronged him. A corpse was supposed to be either properly buried or completely burned to save the community from this aberration. Fatal sex rituals. If you found nail trimming gross, you're sure to find this one abhorrent because now we have fatal sex rituals. These were documented by the 10th century writer Ahmad Ibn Fadlan, as he witnessed this while traveling with a Viking chief who died while traveling east. The body of the chief was kept in a temporary grave while ceremonial clothes were being prepared for him. During this time, a thrall volunteer was to be buried along with her master. She was given plenty to drink and kept in a separate tent. While the ceremony was being prepared, she was passed on to every man of the camp, who would then proceed to facilitate intercourse and claim, "Tell your master I did this because I love him." If this wasn't disturbing enough or creepy enough for you, when the chieftain was then carried to the longship, the thrall also boarded. But instead of being cremated alive as the previous customs would tell you, she was then taken to the ship by 6 men and then stabbed to death before being laid alongside the master. After this gruesome ceremony was completed, the longship was set on fire. Something along the same lines was another belief that led to another misogynist ritual. This belief was termed the essence of life. It was supposed that the ejaculation of a man carried with it the essence of life itself. And what better way to ensure its survival than to sacrifice a female thrall, or even widows at times? Regardless of how progressive the inheritance laws might have felt, this right here, not so much. The rites and rituals had to be carried out in a proper fashion, for only then Vikings believed would the dead ancestors protect them against evil. Ceremonial rites would also ensure that the dead reach their final resting place, be it the halls of Valhalla, the fields of Folk Vanguard, or the Holy Mountain. So with this, we conclude our topic for the day. If you found the video fascinating, do show your appreciation by dropping a like. Be sure to comment and tell us what you liked. Follow us for more amazing content, and click on the bell icon for the latest updates.